I just want to show you a little bit of the reality under which Palestinians live, what they are subjected to under this brutal military occupation by the Zionists. So I posted this video earlier today. Khalid Bashir, a Palestinian from Jabal al-Mukabbir in Palestine, is destroying his house by himself as Israel ordered him to demolish it. This is so dehumanizing, it really is. So just to give you some more background, a few kilometers away, at Beit Hanina, two brothers also demolished their homes to avoid heavy fines by the occupier state. So just to explain this to you, you might be wondering, well, why are they demolishing their own homes? Why would someone do that? So the way this works is that the Zionist occupation, they give you a choice. They tell you, you either demolish your home by yourself, or we're going to bulldoze it. And you have to pay for the bulldozer and all of the costs associated. How humane? How moral? Do you understand now why BDS is so important? The company Caterpillar, for example, they provide bulldozers, they sell bulldozers to the Israelis who use them en masse all the time to bulldoze Palestinian homes. I mean, you have to keep in mind, this goes all the way back to 1948, right? You have entire villages and towns wiped off the map. Why do you think there are millions of Palestinian refugees? They just decided to leave the country for no reason? Why do you think there's a Palestinian diaspora? They were kicked out of their homes. And this is not just something that happened in 1948. It's still ongoing. We covered just a few weeks ago a little girl crying while they bulldozed her house. This is a regular occurrence. This happens all the time. I have no words. I don't think you could adequately describe how inhumane this is. You really can't. And as I pointed out here, this is ethnic cleansing. This is ethnic cleansing. And you need to understand something, that this is not conjecture or some loose employment of the term. No, it's textbook, by definition, ethnic cleansing, right? So when you depopulate an area, whether you do it with a rifle or with a court order, it doesn't matter. It's still ethnic cleansing. You're trying to relocate, you're expelling and driving out people, forcing them out of their homes. And like I said, this has been going on for 72 years. Moreover, it's not just a question of depopulating, it's also a question of Israel's policy where they try to gather all the Jews from around the world and give them citizenship and encourage them to come and live in Israel. So that way they can legitimize their occupation, right? One of the reasons why people speak of an apartheid state, I think it's way worse than apartheid, and people who have lived under apartheid South Africa will tell you the same thing. But one of the reasons people use that term is that inside of Israel, right? So I'm not talking about the West Bank and Gaza. Even if you're Palestinian, you're subjected to another set of rules. There's over 100 different laws just for Palestinians. It's an ethno state. So by definition, you're never going to have a democracy. You're never going to have equality or equity. It's already putting Palestinians at a disadvantage. If you're not white and if you're not Jewish, you're already going to be treated differently. Just like Ethiopian Jews are treated differently and incarcerated at a higher rate inside of Israel. Even those Jews, just because they're black, they don't have the same rights and treatment as white European Jews who make up most of the Israeli settler colonialist population. And for Palestinians, I mean, it's on a whole other level. They just flat out murder them. As we saw with Iyad Halla, 32-year-old man who had autism. He was killed on May 30th. Of course, no one was prosecuted. And so one of their policies is to try and fill up the country as much as possible, because if they gave everyone voting rights, and if they included all of the Palestinians in Israeli society, guess what? They'd be outnumbered. So they will never give Palestinians equal rights. They can't. Because Palestinians, since it's Palestine, it's their land, which is why they outnumber everyone else. They didn't just fall out the sky. It was not an empty land just waiting for people to come take over it. If they gave all Palestinians equal rights, well, that wouldn't work out too well in their favor, would it? So what's absolutely ludicrous here is that we're not even talking about what they call Israel. This is East Jerusalem. East Jerusalem is internationally recognized as occupied territory. So after 1967, they took the Golan Heights from Syria. They took the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt. They took parts of the West Bank. They took East Jerusalem. These have all been illegally occupied by Israel since 1967. Now, they gave Sinai back to the Egyptians, but the Golan Heights are still under occupation. I mean, the entirety of Palestine is under occupation. Let's be real here. All of Palestine is under occupation. The whole thing is being occupied, okay? It's not just some parts of it. All of Palestine. But my point here is that East Jerusalem specifically is internationally recognized as occupied territory. UN Security Council Resolution 242 specifically states that Israel has to withdraw from all of these occupied territories that it captured in 1967. Okay? And this was unanimously passed. Not one member abstained, not one member voted against. Even the United States voted for this resolution in the UN Security Council. Okay? Unanimously passed. Israel is still in violation of it. The United States, Donald Trump violated it by saying he recognizes Jerusalem as the capital of Israel and the Golan Heights as being Israeli, when Jerusalem is not the capital of Israel and the Golan Heights are Syrian. So my point is, what I'm trying to get to here, the argument that's being made by trolls, by the Israelis, is that this man over here that's demolishing his own home, Khalid Bashir, he didn't have a permit. How can you issue a permit on land that does not belong to you? You don't have the right to issue any permit. You don't even have the right to be on that land. It's occupied territory. You have no legitimacy to be issuing permits. Your permits are fucking worthless. They're toilet paper. He doesn't need a permit from you. I mean, the audacity. This isn't even something up for debate. I mean, like I said, and again, that's also not up for debate, all of Palestine is being occupied. But East Jerusalem is specifically recognized by the United Nations worldwide that it's illegally occupied by Israel. You don't have the right to be issuing permits. They have no right to be there. It's very reminiscent of Nazis in the 1930s, after they passed the Nuremberg laws in 1935, telling Jews whether they can operate a business. As a matter of fact, they shut down most of them flat out. You know, the Nazis would say, oh, if you're Jewish, you need a permit for this, right? So they try to regulate, they try to marginalize entire groups of minorities. Does that make it legitimate? Of course not. It's racist, it's unfair, it's unjust. It violates their human rights. This is no different from Nazis telling Jews that they can't own businesses and they can't participate in society and they can't do this and that in Germany in the 1930s. It's no different. So fuck your permit. This barbaric racist behavior is immoral, it's unjust, it's inhumane. Fuck what your law says in Israel. Fuck what your permit says or your court. The whole thing is illegitimate. I mean, this is so degrading. It really is. It really is. I cannot begin to imagine how this man feels. And these two brothers over here having to destroy their homes too. And, you know, I want to point out another thing. This is from Middle East Monitor. They say here that Israel does not only demolish structures built by Palestinians. In 2019, it demolished 97 structures funded by the EU or member states worth some 480,000 euros in the West Bank. a 90% increase on the year before. The same report noted that Israel also demolished 35% more Palestinian structures and displaced 95% more Palestinian people in the West Bank and East Jerusalem than in 2018. So, they're going wild. The EU's response was, quote, demolitions and seizures of humanitarian assets are contrary to Israel's obligations under international law. And they added that to date, not a single euro has been paid back by Israel for its actions. So, the European Union, they finance a lot of cultural projects. They finance a lot of humanitarian projects outside the EU as well. And I just find it ironic how they condemn these actions by Israel. They issue a statement, but they're never going to implement sanctions or an arms embargo or any kind of tangible punishment or consequence for these kinds of barbaric acts. Of course not, right? Sanctions and punishments, these are reserved for Syria, Venezuela, Iran, right? But not Israel. Israel can get away with anything they like, and no one is going to hold them accountable. Even when they are in clear violation of every single international norm. I mean, this is not even up for debate. It's not even up for debate. Israel has a track record of using demolitions as collective punishment for Palestinians, either families or the whole population. This has been particularly used in its attacks on Gaza, whether from the bombing of Gaza's airport, Yasser Arafat International Airport in 2000, to the bombing of Gaza's only electricity station in 2014. Israel's destruction of and damage to facilities also extends to medical facilities, including hospitals. It's been about 6 years now since the war in 2014 ended in Gaza. And just look at the state that it's in. They banned construction materials. You had over 100,000 Palestinians homeless, making them live in rubble. And in 2006, when Israel invaded Lebanon, they also targeted civilian infrastructure. They bombed the Hariri International Airport. They bombed civilian infrastructures for water and electricity. Like, they target this stuff on purpose, and that's a blatant war crime. Again, you can't have it both ways. They can't claim that, we have the most moral army, and we are so sophisticated, and we are so advanced. And then they keep making mistakes, killing UN personnel, bombing civilian infrastructure, bombing UN facilities and schools and health centers. I mean, they claim that they are always respectful of human life, and they don't target civilian infrastructure, and they only target Hamas and Hezbollah and Iranian militants and militias, as they say, right? They only target military objectives, and yet they keep killing thousands of civilians, damaging hundreds of thousands of homes in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Syria. You got to pick one. Are you doing this on purpose and committing war crimes, or are you incompetent? Either way, maybe you should get the fuck out of other people's countries and stop bombing them, right? I think that's a sensible conclusion. So this is of no surprise. But of course, the mainstream media, they won't tell you that. I mean, have you ever, just once, be honest now, have you ever just once seen on CNN or Fox News or MSNBC or BBC or ITV anything about Israelis bulldozing Palestinians' homes? They won't even make a peep about that, because just to show that, I mean, just to say that would shock people outright. Never mind the murdering and the bombings and the killings of Palestinians. If you showed people's homes being bulldozed, people would be rightfully outraged. Of course, you would be outraged. And if you showed them being forced to damage their own homes and destroy their own homes, lest they be subjected to fines and imprisonment, people would rightfully be outraged. So they will never tell you about that, right? They can't, because Israel's entire existence is based off of a settler colonialist project. The whole idea is that you have people coming from all over the world to live there. And to do that, they have to kick people out of their homes. They have to expel and force Palestinians from their homes. The whole point, the whole existence of Israel is based off of screwing Palestinians and making them suffer. So of course they won't show you this. Another point that I want to make is, do you understand now why it's so ridiculous to talk about future annexations and then praise Donald Trump and the Emiratis and Israel for making peace and postponing annexation? What difference does that make? They're already screwing Palestinians. They're killing them. They're subjecting them to inhumane, disgusting, unlivable conditions. They've already annexed and stolen all of their land. They bulldoze their homes on a regular basis. They're already committing atrocities. Postponing or canceling more annexation doesn't change that. As a matter of fact, it validates and normalizes and de facto means that you accept everything that has already happened. You can't do that. How could you accept this? How could you tolerate this? The housing crisis in the US, the eviction crisis that's about to take place, or what happened in 2008, 1.5 million people being kicked out of their homes. Dude, I mean, if that's horrible enough, and it is, just imagine somebody bulldozing your house and or just straight up kicking you out and coming to live in your house. Could you imagine that shit? That's exactly what Palestinians are going through. And they're being killed and they're being bombed, and millions of them fled and had to flee. Think about that. Think about that. Somebody showing up to your house with a bulldozer and machine guns, and if you don't leave, they kill you. And you got your family fleeing to neighboring countries. And I mean, what is this, man? It really is evil. It really is humiliating. And no one should have to go through that. This is just beyond disgusting. And once again, I tell you to keep something in mind, man. I tell you to keep something in mind. A lot of these people that come to Israel are dual nationals. They have two passports, right? They get an Israeli passport, Israeli citizenship, and they have their original one, maybe like Ukrainian, American, whatever. They not only have more rights and the ability to travel and live abroad, but on top of it, they come and steal someone else's land and someone else's home. Palestinians don't even have one fucking passport or one nationality. They can't even go anywhere. So how is that fair that you have two passports, you have two nationalities, you're a citizen of two countries, and Palestinians get nothing? And on top of it, you kick them out of their homes. And on top of it, you murder them. And on top of it, you bomb them. And on top of it, you control their water and their electricity. And on top of it, if they open their mouth, you call them terrorists. How the fuck is that fair? And then you're going to fine them if they don't demolish their own homes? You're going to come bulldoze their homes and then make them pay for it. Who the fuck would accept this? How dare you even suggest that anyone should accept this shit? I mean, just in the US Congress alone, you got like 40, 50 members of Congress who are dual nationals. Okay? Palestinians don't even have one nationality on their own fucking land. What is that? How can you justify that? That's not fair.